Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to Misinformation in Science and Society. Here to listen, not to judge. I'm your host Annie, and today with us we have Darren Lilleker. Yeah, so hi, welcome. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit and what you do?
Sure, yeah. My name is Darren Lilleker. I'm Professor of Political Communication at Bournemouth University. I've been studying campaigning for about 25 years. And I guess, sort of taking in all forms of campaigning and the recent developments, particularly looking at social media and some of the more negative effects social media has on campaigns and trust.
Mm-hmm. So, why did you choose this career initially?
That's a very good question. I think in a way it found me. At the end of my degree, I didn't really have a great idea what to do, and I was offered a scholarship,
Mm-hmm.
and so did a PhD, and then that was on the process. But I enjoyed the research, I enjoyed reading, I enjoyed learning about things. So yeah, it kind of I enjoyed the route I was going on, but there was never a kind of an idea at some point in time. What I really want to do is be a researcher and academic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what's your favorite part of doing what you do now?
um, well, I suppose there's several um, favorite parts, if you like. One is I guess completion of a project is a favorite thing, but that entails sort of that contribution of knowledge, that finding something out and sharing it with others. And I suppose on the pathway through that as well is also sharing data and new findings with students, and also seeing what students think. I think that they're always a really interesting sounding board for new ideas and also them contributing ideas. We have quite an international group of students at Bournemouth, so they'll often give me examples of how something works in countries that I'm not always that familiar with, or their own perspectives from within a country where I can read about it, but actually living in a country is a completely different experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So why do you think that like truth is so important and why misinformation is such a big issue, especially like right now?
Well, I mean, I suppose you know having facts out there. I mean, in a way, that's my job. And you know, as an academic,
Mhm.
we try to produce empirical evidence and base everything on fact and what other people have developed and build on that. So, having evidenced work and being aware of the shortcomings of work is really important. And that's where politicians and a lot of the people who work within politics, and I can not naming any particular organizations or groups or politicians, but there is a problem with them trying to make arguments because they want to convince people they're right, as opposed to having the evidence there to prove something is right. And I think that's where there was a big problem. And so many things are delivered with certainty by politicians and also by media at times when we really don't know. And I think the pandemic was a great example of that, where so much was unknown at the beginning and all the way through, really. But politicians were telling everybody things were certain.
Mhm.
Um, and once they told people they were certain about what was going to happen at the beginning of the pandemic, which all proved largely untrue because you couldn't predict
Yeah.
it then makes it hard for people to trust them later
Mm.
when they say the vaccines are safe, they've all been tested, so if you aren't completely open with people at the beginning, and it's like any relationship in life, if you withhold information, if you don't tell the full truth, if you lie to people particularly, they're not going to trust you in the future. And I think that's part of that problem with misinformation. And so what people will then do is, if they don't trust politicians, if they don't trust experts, they'll try to work out what they think the common sense answer is. And then they'll find information that supports what they think. And the problem with the social media is you can find it. Every possible opinion is out there somewhere. And you can find it. That's what I think. Somebody else thinks it. Great, I must be right. So that's kind of the problems of all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see that a lot in my life as well. Um, Especially with like social media, like algorithms. Like
Mm.
if you see like one thing, then you see like a similar thing, and then that's like all you see. Um, so how specifically, I guess, could you go into detail, like how specifically do people in your field like try to tackle or avoid misinformation in the process of everything?
Well, it's difficult because it's impossible often to avoid misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
It's to what extent you critically think about information that you receive. And the problem with social media, and this is just a problem with the speed of it,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's not really designed for people to use a lot of critical thinking. We've done some interviews with people talking about them processing news, and people will read different parts of newspapers in different ways. So they'll pick up bits for entertainment. They won't take the gossip and entertainment sections very seriously, but they may take the sports section or the news section, depending on their interests, quite seriously, and they'll kind of prepare themselves to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think we do that with social media, because there is absolutely no consistency to content. It can be an advert, it can be a friend posting about their dinner, it can be someone's children, cute cats, and a political message, all just jumbled up. And so there is a problem with how much people absorb these things just naturally. And if we see something, we see a friend of ours we haven't seen for years, they have a cat. And in the back of our minds, we know they have a cat. But we could also see a similar picture that says a politician has done something corrupt. And that can also be in the back of our mind, that person's corrupt. So these kinds of little bits of information, we store them without thinking about them in the same way as we might do if we face them on news. I think that's the problem is to try to explain this to people and encourage them to use more kind of critical functions when they see something that looks like it should be news, as opposed to it's your friend and they have a cat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, so what do you think like the worst type of misinformation is? Like about what?
Well, I suppose it depends on the effect, and I think the effect is the worst thing. So it's misinformation, or possibly disinformation is the right word, because that's deliberate, which is circulated that encourages people to do something that is harmful to themselves or others.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that be the kind of disinformation that drove a man to go and fire shots into a pizza restaurant in Washington, or whether that is the disinformation that encouraged people to storm the Capitol, or if it's disinformation that encourages them to try bleach as an alternative to any proper sort of medical things. I think those sorts of things are the most serious, because they have real effect. And it's that's kind of the most pernicious type of disinformation, particularly if it's trying to move people to do something that is going to cause harm. And you look at some of that work coming out of extremist groups, whether that be Islamic State or whether that be the far right. They're trying to mobilize people and motivate people to do things, and to commit acts of violence, in order to further their agenda. So I suppose that's the very worst. Luckily, it's a very small amount of it. And then there is the kind of the disinformation that is, I'm never quite sure, the things like the bleach thing with COVID, it sounded utterly ridiculous as an idea, but was circulating online that these things could be useful. And it came from some, off the hand remark by well, I know Donald Trump repeated it. I don't know if he was the source of it originally, but so those sort of things are really dangerous, and the sort of thing that we need to be quite careful about and critical about. But I think there's also a lot of disinformation. It may not cause people to do something, but it causes anxiety in societies. If you receive lots of messages saying your politicians are corrupt, then you will be distrusting of them, but you'll also be anxious about the future. If you read some of the news items or the clickbait headlines but don't think behind them, you can see serious problems coming up. And all of these things, they create tensions in society within us, because we're worried about what's going to happen next. So I think all of that has an effect. It's just some are more serious than others.
Yeah. So, then what do you think would be like the best way for like individuals or like regular people to eliminate, avoid, um, reduce misinformation? Um, yeah, because a lot of the times, like it's like as you said, um, well, like a lot of like big organizations or like news platforms or like things like that. So what can like an individual like me do?
I think it's a case of not mistrusting everything, but just being cautious, being careful, being a little bit skeptical. So, I one of the things that circulates quite a lot is clickbait. And if you go onto something like Microsoft News, there are some quite dramatic headlines which don't always reflect what's behind them in the article. So when you're looking at something like that, having that skepticism that why are they doing this? And the knowledge that what they really want is a click, because that then gets them the advertising revenue. And so more people being aware of that and just being a little bit skeptical about what they're reading, in the same way perhaps as people seem naturally skeptical when a politician speaks. It would be nice if they had that same skepticism to when they see something that is somewhere online and the source is unknown and the purpose of it is unknown. And so I think it's just having that constant sort of barrier there, so you don't get drawn into things that may not be true. And kind of, rather than suspending disbelief, suspending belief in everything. Because I think people tend to kind of have this idea of, if it's not too serious, if it looks like it's true, it must be true. And I think that's a problem, because it's then very easy. And as you said about the algorithms, if you like something, you'll see more things like it. And that can then build up this belief until it is, very, very strong. So I think those sort of things people have to be very careful about. But it's just being aware of how media works and how it operates. And so then not believing everything you read, because it has a purpose, often designed to make money.
Yeah. Um, So those were all my questions about misinformation. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that covers the main points. I mean, there's so much that can be said about misinformation,
Mm.
and that whole kind of problem of the media environment. But I think I've covered it well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I listen back and go, oh no, but
No, no. And I just have like two more questions, just like to
okay.
wrap it up and just for fun. So the first one is what inspires you like in life? Like what are some of your inspirations? Either like person, idea, like work.
Um, I mean, I suppose the people who I see as heroes are people who so keep going despite troubles and despite all of those things, so but strive for something good in the end, and I don't know. I mean, I suppose I'd have to really sort of think about it and think, who would be a great inspiration. But sort of in terms of heroes, people like Nelson Mandela, not because of who he was and what he became, but that idea of struggling with a fundamental truth and a challenge in society, and I think people like that, you know, they are very inspirational in that they keep going despite everything.
Mhm.
And he is, I suppose, is rare in a way because he was vindicated.
Mm. And do you have any advice for people, especially like teens, about just anything?
I don't know. I mean, apart from the advice about misinformation, I think it's well, I mean, I'll sound very old in saying, sort of, work hard, be honest to yourself. But but staying true to yourself. I think one of the challenges in the modern age with social media and kind of those constructed personas that we can create for ourselves, being true about who we are and
Hmm.
what we believe and what we feel, um, is important, but also accepting that others are different and listening to difference and listening to why people have different views and different perspectives. I think we always believe ourselves to be right. We have to be in a way. But I think we also have to accept that we are who we are because of where we came from and what we do. And so my view of the world is very different to other people I was at school with because of where I am now.
Hmm.
But accepting that their route through their lives has been different. And so finding that common ground with people, I think, is really important. And it's very easy to be polarized and antagonistic towards people who don't agree with you. But finding common ground, I think, is kind of something we're losing in society in a way,
Mm.
because we can find our own views, we can find people who agree with us, and we can build up that belief that we are right and that everybody else is wrong. And that's the bit that's kind of a problem when you just believe everyone else is wrong.
Mm. Yeah, it goes like both ways. Like you believe
Mm.
everyone's right, and then well, yeah, 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 for sure. So, yeah, that's all I have for today.
Okay,
Thank you so much for joining
my
this.
pleasure.
Yeah,
My pleasure, and do send me a link.
yeah, yeah. Of course, I will.
Yeah,
All right,
wonderful. Good to see you. Enjoy it. You've got a whole day ahead, so enjoy the rest of your day.
all right. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day as well.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.